Let's pray. What a weighty word, Lord. Don't judge by appearances. Judge with a righteous judgment. The brothers had judged by appearances. The crowds had judged by appearances. So God, grant that we here would not judge by appearances. We wouldn't think on the surface of things. That we'd see through deeds and see through words to the heart of things, to the reality of things. We don't want to be a shell-gazing people. We want to get to the heart of the matter. So work now in this room, I pray. And grant me to see truth and to speak truth. Forbid that I would want to seek my own glory and not the glory of him who sent me, and so prove to be a false prophet in the end. Oh God, grant that your people would so love your glory that they would be a God-exalting people rather than a self-exalting people, and so have within them the moral grounds for knowing Jesus. I ask this now in his great name. Amen. This is the second time now we're going through this text. The title of the message will tip you off to where the focus will be in this message. The title is God's Will as a Way of Knowing Christ's Word, which you can see comes from verse 17. If anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God. So that's where we're going. Verses 17 and 18 in particular. And I can remember back to my college days when this truth and this text was first brought to my attention. I remember the fall of 67 and what a effect it had on me. I'll say more about that later. What a great astonishment it was that willing is the basis of knowing. Really, I thought you had to know Christ in order to form a volition about his truthfulness. What is this, Jesus? How can he say this? That before you can know Christ and whether he's true, your will must come into alignment with God's will. These are very profound things. Shook me up big time in 1967. There are things for you to learn here, I don't doubt, about your own soul, how it works in relation to your head. How knowing and willing are all related to each other. So that's where we're going. But let's start at verse 3. So his brothers said to him, "Leave here and go to Judea, and that your disciples may see the works that you're doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." And then this astonishing statement. Because not even his brothers believed in him. So they believed in him as a miracle worker. They were just blown away. Our brother can work miracles. We've seen him. So we want to get him to do it in a more public way. Go up to Jerusalem. That's where everybody is. And if you want to be known, for goodness sakes, go to Jerusalem and do your works publicly. And they said this because they didn't believe in him. That was last week's message, trying to figure that out. And what we saw was that they didn't see through. They were judging by appearances. Verse 24 really flies like a banner over this passage. They didn't see through to who he was, what his heart was. Sure, he was going to go up to Jerusalem, but he wasn't going to go up to try to attract a lot of attention to himself and get a lot of praise. He was going to die. He was going to be spit upon, have his beard pulled and be beaten, ripped to shreds. That's why he's going up. You want to go? They didn't want to go. They were all about seeking their own praise. And they've got a brother now who could help them in that process. And if that's what makes your heart tick, you can't know him. And they didn't. They didn't believe, and they didn't know him. So he says to them in verse 6, my time is not yet come. Your time is always here. The world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify about it that its works are evil. So my time for glory, there's glory coming, but my time for glory isn't here yet, and it's certainly not here in the way you think it's coming. So you go up. The world's not going to hate you. Why isn't the world going to hate you? You think like the world. Your life, your disposition is no indictment to the world at all. I'm an indictment to the world. They look at me and they get mad because I live for my Father's glory and they live for theirs, and therefore I call them into question. Everything I say and do is a problem for the world, not for you. The world looks at you and they see a reflection of themselves, a religious version, but they're not going to get upset about your life as long as you want to be made somebody by my miracle working. So he went up in private first, and then he went more public, and he began to teach, and what he said was amazing to the Jewish people. So verse 15, the Jews therefore marveled, saying, how is it that this man has learning when he has never studied? So, the brothers were stargazing at his miracle-working power, and the people were stargazing at his what? He sounds learned, but he hasn't studied. That he's not a rabbi like our rabbis, but goodness, listen to him. That's all surface. The miracle admiration was surface. The learning admiration was surface. Judge with right judgment, not with appearances. See through, hear through, move through. Their amazement was not a godly amazement. It wasn't a spiritual amazement. Something about his teaching wowed them. Learned, scholarly, literary, articulate, profound, whatever it was. They say, how does this man have learning when he's never studied? He was impressive. He was impressive to them, and they were not touched at all spiritually. Not at all. So Jesus did the same thing with them that he did with his brothers. He deflected their admiration to God. Verse 16. So Jesus answered them, my teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. So if you're going to admire something, direct it to God. Of course, he could have said, couldn't he, you wonder why you're wowed at my teaching? I'm God. What do you expect? He could have said that, and we wrestled with this a little bit last week, that the deflection of praise isn't what he always did. He came to be worshiped. But he is a man as well as divine. And therefore, he's modeling for us how to live in relation to the Father. And in this case, at this point in his ministry, he's modeling for us the perfect manhood that he has. And it isn't out to get human praise. It's out to serve. It's out to suffer. So he deflects their amazement away from himself to God. Verse 16, my teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. So he says. And now the question arises, how can we know that? You say so. How can we know that? How can you know that? I'm sure there are people in this room who don't know that. That when Jesus speaks, God is speaking. Don't believe that. You're here because somebody brought you, or you're exploring, or there have always been lurking doubts in your heart. And so it's your question. It's really all of our question. And isn't it good that Jesus raises it? Jesus raises this question. And he raises it here because it's very clear to him these crowds do not know that his teaching comes from God. They don't believe that. And you can see it in verse 15. How is it that this man has learning when he's never studied? Goodness gracious. Who cares if he has learning? I mean, why are you fixated on learning? I think Jesus would just shaking his head and say, I'm here to give life and to speak ultimate truth, and you're puzzling about my articulate sentences or whatever. How is it that this man has learning? In other words, they're shell gazers. This is the shell. This is a shell. We all have shells, and a lot of people just live at the level of shell gazing. Oh, look at that. That woman is beautiful, and she has such a voice. That preacher is learned. His sentences hang together. Let's go there. Check your relationship to your favorite heroes, your God, your friends, yourself, and whether you're a shell gazer or whether you don't care too much about the shell. You just want to go through. I want life. I want truth. I want reality. I'm going through. I don't care about the shell of this singer or this preacher or this actor. America is just media driven by these stars, right? And we're just shell gazers. There's only one question that matters with anybody. Are they true? Do they speak truth? Are they true? What they say and what they are in relation to God and the world, does it all hang together in perfect integrity and truth? That's all I care about. What do I give a rip about miracle working and articulate sermons? I want truth. That's the issue. So many preachers, so many singers, so many actors. Whoa, this man's got learning. Whoa, she's got looks and a voice. Whoa, he's hip, cool, shell. The question is, are they true? So Jesus poses the big question for your heroes, for your friends, for your God, for yourself. How can you know? How can you know? Here's his answer, verse 17. If anyone's will is to do God's will, he will know whether the teaching is from God. He'll know. Or whether I'm speaking on my own authority. So, 1967, fall, Wheaton College, I was just shocked when I heard this. I mean, I'd read the Gospel of John, goodness, who knows, 100 times maybe by that point in my life. How could I miss this? Right willing is the foundation of right knowing? This seemed to make life really complicated. It made life more mysterious than I never thought it was. It made me less in control. I mean, I've got a brain, I know how to use it, but you tell me my brain is going to perceive truth when my willing gets right, that complicates life for me. Puts me out of control. It makes life less rationalistic. Can't manage things so easily if this is true. I feel off kilter. I feel out of balance, out of control. It's miracles that got to happen down inside of me if I'm going to even think right about Jesus. If we stopped at verse 17, which is where we are right now, didn't go on into verse 18, we'd have a general truth. It would be a true truth, but it would be without specifics. And the general truth would be something like this. You will discern that Jesus is a reliable spokesman from God when your will deeply and profoundly comes into sync with God's will. That's the true general truth of verse 17. You will know Jesus, you will recognize him for who he is as a true spokesman for God when your will is brought into sync with God's will. When your willing is in sync with God's, your knowing will be in sync with truth. That's the general truth. But we're not going to stop at verse 17 because Jesus has much more help to give us here. I didn't see this as clearly until I was a pastor at this church in the mid-'80s. I've preached on this text before, and I intentionally did not read that sermon to get ready for this one. It's from scratch. But now you got 2 sermons online from this text. You can see, did he change his mind or something? I did want to say that later. After I wrote it, I did something. So verse 18, so life-affecting for me in relation to verse 17. So let's work with this for a minute. The one who speaks on his own authority seeks his own glory. But the one who seeks the glory of him who sent him is true. And in him there is no falsehood, or no unrighteousness would be more literal. Now, remember, when the crowds were impressed with Jesus' learning, he said to them in verse 16, "My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me." So he deflected their amazement at his learning to God. From self-exaltation, he deflects it from self-exaltation to God-exaltation. That's what's going on. They're coming at him, "You're amazing." And he says, "Well, whatever that is, my words are not mine. They're God's." So if you want to be amazed at God. Now, he explains in verse 18 that this, what he did in verse 16, this is how you can know he's true. The one who seeks his own glory, The one who seeks the glory of him who sent him, that's what he was doing, is true. And in him there is no falsehood. So let's put 17 and 18 together now and try to figure out their relationship. So verse 17 says, if your will is to do God's will, you can know whether Jesus is a true spokesman for God. Verse 18 says, the way you can know if he's true is whether he's seeking the glory of God above all things. Okay, now that sets the stage for a lot of thinking about the relationship between those two verses. My will's got to get changed so I can know him. And the way I know him is that he loves the glory of God more than anything. And he's not into self-exaltation, he's into God exaltation. And that's true, that's the mark of truth. So what's the relationship now between these two verses? Verse 17, willing God's will enables us to know him for who he really is. And verse 18, you can know that he's really true because he's totally committed to exalting his Father. And the way I put the two together is this. Verse 18 describes specifically the deepest change that has to happen in my will in order to see Jesus as who he is. The mark of his truth is a passion for God exaltation, not self-exaltation. Got that? That's verse 18. The mark of his truthfulness is a passion for God exaltation, not self-exaltation. Now, for me to see that and be drawn to it and recognize it as the mark of truth, I've got to be changed. That's not the way I am by nature, nor you. By nature, we love our own glory. We love the praise of man. That's the way we're wired. To be made much of feels better to us than anything in the world when we come into this world. And something really profound in the alteration of our wills has to happen for us to begin to enjoy making much of God more than we enjoy being made much of by people. Something really profound has to happen, and that's the change being called for in verse 17. Our wills have to come into sync with God's will, and God's will for his Son and for us is that we live for his glory, that we deflect to him, that we love to see him made much of, and we're not addicted any longer to this craving for human praise that governed us. That's the connection between 17 and 18 that I see.